Hey guys, and welcome back to another session. Today we're gonna have some good time. We're gonna do some Python. So today I wanted to do some Python stuff. To do some intro to Python. Take us from zero to like on a scale to 100, like maybe a 2. Probably a little bit better than that, but really a lot of this stuff comes with repetition and practice. So no matter what we talk about here and we exercise and do here, and I encourage you guys to follow me along during this journey. There really is a lot of personal accountability into making sure that this stuff gets practiced and expanded upon day to day. If you really want to be a software engineer or you're currently a software engineer, you know that a lot of this comes with learning on YouTube, doing like free code boot camps or joining a code boot camp, talking to peers, being part of Reddits, Discords, and continuously learning and growing. If you're not doing that, it's going to be really challenging to stay up to date. So let's jump into it, right? So what is Python used for? Python's one of those really amazing languages that really can be used for anything. For a lot of things. I won't say for anything. Anything's really generic. But it can be used for a lot. It's a very powerful language. And what I mean by powerful is, or what makes a language powerful, in my opinion, I think this is very, there's some hard guidelines on here, but I'm gonna give you my interpretation of why I think languages are powerful. And there's various different reasons for this. The biggest one for me is the community. Like, what can you do out with very minimal effort? There, what has a lot of bindings already. And what I mean by bindings is, what SDKs or frameworks do I have that the community has provided or the library provides already for me to do things either at a low level. That could be like building API frameworks or doing machine learning or playing with very big data sets, very business orientated things. Really simplistically, and Python does check all those boxes, right? Majority of your machine learning stuff's going to be like in R or Python, and there's a lot of really good underbelly of C that supports this, which is called like Python. So a lot of people don't know this, but under Python, you're really using shorthand for Python, right? And what that means is we have a lot of things written in C, and then we have this higher level abstraction, meaning we have this Python code that we can leverage instead of writing C directly, which is definitely not something that I recommend anyone doing for fun. So very cool that C's built, Python's built on top of that. And just for a little context, Python is a weakly typed runtime language. And what that means is it doesn't compile down, even though there is PYC files. It doesn't have to be built. You don't compile it before you run it. You pass it to the Python interpreter. That's why when you run Python, you'll call Python, and then you'll call your files, like your entry point. So either like your main py or server py or whatever that entry point is for your application, and that will start up your Python application. Now there's some caveats to that, like a lot of web frameworks, when you build out like web APIs and things of that nature, you might use something like Waitress, and Waitress might actually call like an underlying Python class to initialize itself. But at the end of the day, Python is a runtime language, meaning that you don't compile it down. It's weakly typed. Means that it doesn't have static types on things. So very easy to iterate and develop Python. It's also very challenging to work in, as a new engineer, work in someone else's code repo in Python, in my opinion, unless they are using some strongly typed or have really good documentation in there. And we'll learn through this, through tonight, why that's super important. So what else can Python be used for? You can build out like RESTful APIs. There's a lot of frameworks out there that Python supports. You got Django, Flask. Those are the two biggest ones. So Django is really big. Flask is also a really big framework. And these things are super popular in the the Python world. Now, Django, I would consider what's called a full framework, meaning that it gives you like everything plus the kitchen sink. So if you're going to use Django, you know, they have like a lot of middleware ready for you to go to like interface with like databases or handling like authentication, building out like all your routes. Where Flask is more of a minimalistic framework, meaning that you can get Flask and you can build a lot of things around it, or you can pull in other libraries that help you build and implementate on top of Flask. You know, other Flask middleware. It doesn't all come in in one package. It doesn't force you to do it in a certain way. Both are perfectly good, powerful, you know, web frameworks. I prefer Flask, but I know there's a lot of successful businesses and a lot of successful projects that work on Django. So both are very, very viable. Another thing is, you know, big data, right? So data scientists in general like to use Python. There's NumPy and Pandas, which makes really short work of taking big data sets and, you know, doing in-memory query operations and filtering data and grouping data. Makes really like short work of that. Also, if you're handling lots and lots of data, you usually use like a big data pipeline. And one of the popular ways, or one of the popular, a lot of popular pipelines or big data warehouses, they might give you a Jupyter, which is like pretty much like a web runtime of Python to interact with that data, and they do this with this technology called Spark. So you have PySpark, which is built, and the reason why is because when you have really big data sets, they use multiple machines, multiple distributed machines, and they have a lot of data all over the place. And this is so you can get like a lot of throughput, a lot of CPU processing power. You know, imagine if you have one machine that does something, you can only put so much RAM and CPU in that machine. If we have 50 of those machines or hundreds of those machines, you know, we can leverage all the RAM, all the CPU when we need to. And this is what Spark does. You can have all your data distributed across all of them. You can run a PySpark query, and then it will go out to the Spark servers, and then it will run and aggregate all the data and run your query, and then return it back to you, and for you to filter it out and do whatever you need to do. So really, really cool stuff, and all that's works really great with Python. So it's really awesome for data science and, you know, big data operations. And of course, we're doing big data stuff at the same time. You know, what goes hand in hand with big data? Machine learning. So Python is really good for machine learning stuff. There's a lot of, you know, underlying frameworks out there that are written in C that have a lot of Python abstraction levels, layers for you to, you know, build out machine learning neural nets or natural language processors and all that good stuff. So Python's really big for that. You can use it for CLI tools, text parsers, CI/CD automation, process automation. Pretty much the sky's the limit. You know, if you wanted to do something, you can pretty much always do it in Python. Even small embedded, there's a lot of you know, embedded Python for like small like Raspberry Pi stuff and things like that. So really powerful language, and I think it's really easy to learn. You know, one of my first programming languages was actually PowerShell, but my second one was Python. So you know, if you want to consider PowerShell a programming language, which I honestly do. Let's get started, right? I think step one in general for me is, you know, getting Python on your machine. I don't think this machine has it, but let's check. This is pretty much a new machine, but let's check. So I do have Python. I actually have 3.10. I didn't know that I actually downloaded that. So we're already set up, but just in case you didn't have Python, what you'd want to do is go to Python, type Python 3 in Google. Of course, you probably want to spell it correctly. And then you can go to python.org/downloads, and you'll see a bunch of versions of Python. The latest one being 3.10. By the way, there's a lot of stuff out there with Python 2 still. If you don't know, Python 2 was end of life, EOL'd quite a long time ago. So I would definitely not, and you'll see it right here. Let me zoom in. So Python 2.7 was end of life in 2010, 01, so almost 2 years ago now, or actually a little over 2 years ago. So definitely don't use it. If you're interested in learning Python, I strongly recommend not starting with Python 2. There is some really big changes between Python 2 and Python 3, and there's just really no reason to learn Python 2. Don't do it.